You Ask Me If I Love You, and you ask me if I love you, yes is what I'll vow. The answer's not that simple, I'll explain it to you now. These days I find I'm forced to run, I must keep a breathless pace, but I take time for the important things and give them their rightful place. For nothing else I do, no one else I see allows me to be myself, just wants me to be me. The freedom that you give me, the spring of joy I see, is flooding all my senses as it rushes over me. For with no one else I know, with no one else I see, do I feel as free to be myself. You set me free to be myself. I feel so free to be myself. Feel free to just be me.
So we're going to give this a whirl. Song is called On This Day. That was about 33 years ago. Kind of have some wedding themes going on in my life lately. So brought us together with a plan forever, so we vow to be one for life, as man and wife. We're closer together, sharing joys and sorrows, union built on trust and honesty, eternally on this day. We vow forever on this day. We join our families. Today is the day we begin our new lives. Today is the day, such a special day. We were united as one. Dawning as we start our new lives. This day will live on in our hearts forever. Friends from the beginning and now, never ending union built on trust and honesty, eternally on this day. We vow forever on this day. We join our families. Today is the day we begin our new lives. Today is the day, such a special day. We
This is a song I completed just a little while ago, and I think I can do it tonight. It's about an encounter with a homeless person, and I think that most of it actually occurs in the mind of the protagonist. A shirtless man on my street asked, "Can you spare any change, friend, for me? I'm down on my luck. You know, in fact, I'm quite stuck. And I'm more than a little hungry. What would it change if I gave you my change? If I found that I had change to give? I could buy you a meal. Would that change the deal on the streets of this town where we live? And what would it change if I gave you my change? If I found that I had change on me? You could have the shirt off my back as something you lack, but would you then be any more free? I'll sleep safe and dry in my warm house tonight, without thought of how that came to be. You'll likely sleep rough come the dawn's early light, on a park bench a few blocks from me. What would it change if I gave you my change? If I put a few coins in your cup? Would that turn things around, help you rise from the ground? Would your prospects be then looking up? I could offer an ear, your story to hear. I could extend to you my sympathy. Is it a friend that you need, or just a kind deed of the sort you were hoping from me? I'll sleep safe and dry in my warm house tonight, without thought of how that came to be. You'll likely sleep rough come the dawn's early light, on a park bench a few blocks from me. And what would it change if I could give you real change? If I could give real change to you? A safe place to fall, on all four sides a wall, and a hand you could hold if not two. I'm sorry, my friend, for I carry no coins, no bills for that matter have I. I've no money to give, and my own life to live, so I bid you good luck and goodbye. And I'll sleep safe and dry in my warm house tonight, without thought to how that came to be. Well, you'll likely sleep rough come the dawn's early light, on a park bench a few blocks from me. On a park bench a few blocks from me.
Jim's song that he sang earlier on about the homeless guy. I saw a homeless guy in my part of Cincinnati where I live, which is very unusual actually. And I was reminded of a story. When I was a young guy, I was a scuba diving instructor. I think I might have told you, but I was working in a small store in a town in South Africa, and there was a homeless guy who used to come in every now and again and for a cup of tea. And his name was Dave. This is why I remember him. And I was reminded of Dave when I saw the homeless guy. Now, Dave's story was that he had been a headmaster of a school or a vice headmaster of a school and had been accused of some sort of impropriety and basically had lost his job pending the court case, of course. And of course, but these court cases take ages to come to court. So it was something like 2 years before his case came to court, by which time his wife had left him and taken the kids. He'd lost the house. He was living on the streets. And it took another year or something for the court case. And at the end of the court case, he was found not guilty. And he was exonerated, I guess. But I just thought, I remember thinking at the time, how do you pick yourself up from that position and go back to just living like you used to live before? I mean, how, can you do that? I mean, could a man do that? I mean, I just don't know if I'd be able to do that. I really don't. But anyway, and so this song is called How Can a Man? It deals with that, about being falsely accused and stuff like that, but it deals with more than that. It deals with all these walls that we're putting up and all these, trying to stop people coming in and saying these people are illegal and whatever. It talks about all these kids who are supposed to be looked after by adults and who end up getting molested and whatever. And so it's a nice, happy song. It's called How Can a Man? When a man loses all that he owns, when his loved ones are gone, in a storm tossed and blown, when he's old and alone, wishing he could go home, how can a man? When day after day is the same, when it's pouring with rain, his dreams washed down the drain, and there's nothing but pain in a world gone insane. How can a man? How can a man face the future? How can a man even try? When everything that he once believed in is nothing but tears in his eyes. Now when a man can be falsely accused, as a child be abused, be molested, misused, when love leaves him bruised, unsure and confused, well, how can a man? And when fate, what lies in the stars, truth looked for in bars, leaves him on the cold tar with invisible scars, when sympathy jars, how can a man? How can a man be upstanding? How can he ever feel proud when the weight of all his fears on his shoulders leaves him battered and bowed? When a man is thrown out dispossessed, when he's made to feel less than his absolute best, when he's cursed and oppressed with no means to protest, how can a man? longer, how can a man?
Some of you know, and may in fact be sick and tired by now of hearing about it, I've been pursuing a series of songs about Johnny Appleseed. I find him to be a very interesting character, far more interesting than the Walt Disney movie of 1948, which presented him as this tall, gangly young guy who went around picking ripe, red, juicy apples off of trees and talking to the animals like some sort of combination of a hippie and St. Francis and Dr. Doolittle or something, I don't know. But he was a much more complicated guy than that, although there isn't a whole lot known about the details of his life. He did, in fact, plant lots and lots and lots and lots of apple trees. He had this curious belief that what God really wanted from him and from all people was to recreate the Garden of Eden. That was our mission. So we needed to relate to people and to plants and to animals and everything so as to come as close as we can to recreating the Garden of Eden. So he had this notion that the apple trees that he planted from seeds, he figured that's probably what would have been what they had in the Garden of Eden was seeds. So he would plant seeds, and what you do when you plant an apple tree from seed is that you get this kind of wild, indigenous form of apple that's really, I would say, more like a crab apple. You get these tiny little, very sour apples, and but that's what he planted because his business was to recreate the Garden of Eden if he possibly could. And he worked with the local homesteaders and settlers. He was not like a monk and a crazy guy out in the woods. He was very gregarious, had lots of friends, and planted these trees for a really long time. And when he turned them over, because that was part of his thing, he was very community oriented. He would turn over his trees, his orchards or nurseries, and people would start grafting apples. They would do what orchardists do. They graft, and so you get juicier apples and sweeter apples and apples that are much more interesting and apples that you can press for cider. And if you really have a mind to, you can turn that into hard cider. So in some ways, Johnny Appleseed, religious character that he was kind of like bringing drunkenness to the Midwestern frontier through all these apples that got grafted and eventually got turned into hard cider. So anyway, that's some of the background for Johnny Appleseed. And I have a number of songs that I've written. This one is sort of sung by the townspeople. It's not in Johnny's voice. It's sung by townspeople. And by this time, they've come to appreciate what a cool guy he is and what he can do for them in terms of cider, among other things. John Chapman, he lived for others, that is carved upon his stone. But along the Ohio, up through the Midwest, he paddled and he hiked alone. He was welcome in the settlers' cabins, knew the names of the wives and kids, brought medicinal plants from the woods and the meadows, brought him news of what Jesus did. Apple Johnny, hey, Apple Johnny, ho, ho, paddling his canoe up on the Ohio. Apple Johnny, ho, Apple Johnny, hey, hey. A cloud of apple blossoms on a fine spring day. He had one job above all others, planting apple trees from seeds, establishing claims to wild land with his nurseries and meeting the homesteader needs. But John would not graft his apples. He'd plant rootstock and move on. His apples were small and so sour you'd spit 'em, but folks loved Apple John. Apple Johnny, hey, Apple Johnny, ho, ho. He's paddling his canoe on down the Ohio. Apple Johnny, ho, Apple Johnny, hey, hey. Scent of apple blossoms on a fine spring day. So the settlers would graft their pippins, Grimes and Rome, so delicious. They'd make good hard cider, tip their hats and their hogsheads to the frontiers, Dionysius. They'd say, Johnny Appleseed, Johnny Appleseed. Jesus is the great provider, but Johnny brought him good hard cider. Plant those apple trees. Hey, Johnny Appleseed. Apple Johnny, hey, Apple Johnny, ho, ho. The most peculiar man along the Ohio. Apple Johnny, ho, Apple Johnny, hi. Apples fall to earth beneath an autumn sky. Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed. All his apples gnarled and small, but he's a hero to them all. Such a hearty breed. Johnny Appleseed. John Chapman, he lived for others. That's what's carved upon his stone. But along the Ohio up to the Midwest, he paddled and hiked alone. John Chapman, that was his real name.
And this is Aubry. Bang, bang. Tape. Rain's getting heavy and the air is growing cold. This day is giving way to night, shadows fill my soul. I wonder if she misses me, I wonder how she's been. Does she ever think of what we had? Could it ever be again? I never knew a man could feel so empty and alone. In many ways, my friends all say I'm better off all alone. They never seem to find me till all the rain has fallen, leaving me with a memory of a love forever gone. Autumn rain falls through the night, cold and hot and no end in sight. Dreams of days spent by your side, all washed away by autumn rain. So I wonder as it pours, am I better off or wiser than before? Will I ever love again, or spend my days out in the autumn rain? Autumn rain falls through the night, and cold and hard and knowing inside. Dreams of days spent by your side, all washed away by autumn